The 1906 family photograph was restored, and experts froze when they zoomed in on the youngest child's face. The picture arrived at Maya Richardson's studio on a cold January morning, carefully wrapped in acid-free tissue and tucked inside a padded envelope. Maya ran a specialized photo restoration business in Brooklyn and had handled thousands of damaged images over the years. Civil War tintypes, faded Victorian portraits, water-stained family albums. But there was something about this package that made her extra careful. The return address showed it came from Charleston, South Carolina, sent by a woman named Grace Thompson. The accompanying letter was short. It said, "This photograph has been in my family for generations. It's the only picture we have of my great-great-grandmother's family, but it's badly damaged. I've been told you're the best at what you do. Please help me see their faces clearly." Maya carefully unwrapped the photo and held it under her magnifying lamp. The image was indeed in poor condition. The emulsion had cracked and peeled in many places. Water damage had left dark stains across the bottom third, and someone had tried a crude repair years ago that made it worse. But under the damage, Maya could make out 7 ghostly figures standing in front of a wooden house with a wide porch. The photograph was mounted on thick cardboard, and on the back, written in faded pencil, was a date, June 1906, Charleston. Below that were some names, though several were blurred or illegible from water damage. Maya photographed the original with her high-resolution camera to create a digital copy she could work on without risking the fragile original. She settled at her workstation, opened her restoration software, and began the painstaking process of digital repair. She started with the structural damage, carefully cloning undamaged sections to fill in cracks and gaps, smoothing water stains, and correcting the failed earlier repair. This was precise, technical work, the digital surgery that required patience. Maya had been doing this for 15 years since graduating with a degree in art conservation, and her hands moved with practiced skill across the tablet. After 3 hours, the basic structure of the image was restored. Maya could now see the composition clearly, a family of 7 on the porch. The adults wore their Sunday clothes, the man in a dark suit with a high collar, the woman beside him in a white blouse and long skirt. 5 children ranged from a teenager down to a small girl of about 4 sitting on the porch steps. Maya saved her work, stretched, and rolled her shoulders to ease the tension from hours of focus. Tomorrow she would restore the faces, bringing clarity to features hidden by damage and time. The next morning Maya returned to the photo with fresh eyes and strong coffee. The structural work was complete. Now came the delicate task of revealing the details that made these people individuals. She began with the adults, enhancing contrast and sharpness to reveal lines in their faces, textures in their clothing, and the expressions in their eyes. The man appeared in his mid-30s, with a strong jaw and serious expression, his hand resting on the woman's shoulder, a gesture of protection and partnership. The woman's face showed intelligence and determination, her gaze direct, her posture upright despite the exhaustion of managing a household and 5 children in 1906 Charleston. Maya moved to the children, working from oldest to youngest. The teenage boy, perhaps 15, stood beside his father, already nearly as tall. 2 girls, around 12 and 10, had braided hair with white ribbons. Then a boy of 7 grinned despite the formal pose, 1 front tooth missing. Finally, Maya focused on the youngest child, a little girl sitting on the porch steps with her small hands folded in her lap. Damage to this part of the photo was severe, with a large water stain covering most of her face. Maya worked layer by layer, removing discoloration and enhancing the remaining details. As the child's features appeared, Maya paused. Something about the face seemed unusual. She zoomed in on the eyes and forehead, her breath catching. Even with the grain and imperfections of the old photo, what she saw didn't make sense. The child had characteristics that wouldn't be medically recognized for another 50 years. Maya leaned back, mind racing. She had restored thousands of photos, seen every facial feature imaginable, but this was different. This was something the family in 1906 wouldn't have had words for, something that would have made the child stand out in ways both remarkable and dangerous in the segregated South. She called Dr. James Wright, a colleague teaching medical history at Columbia University. James had helped before when old photographs showed signs of medical conditions. "James, I need you to look at something," Maya said. "I'm restoring a 1906 photograph, and I think I see a genetic condition in this child, but it wasn't identified until the 1950s. Dr. Wright arrived that afternoon. A tall man in his 60s with silver hair and a gentle manner. He leaned forward to study the photo. Maya watched his expression shift from curiosity to astonishment. "You see it too?" she asked. He nodded. "If the photo is authentic?" "Yes. I see clear markers of Waardenburg syndrome. Look at the distance between the inner corners of the eyes, dystopia canthorum. That lighter patch in her hair, that's the white forelock. Most striking, her eyes. One is dark, the other pale blue or grey. Complete heterochromia iridis. Combined with these features, it's almost certainly Waardenburg syndrome type 1. Maya felt a chill. The syndrome wasn't identified until 1951, but this photo was from 1906. People before that would just see her as unusual, James said. For a black child in segregated Charleston, she would have stood out, and it could have been dangerous. Maya imagined what life must have been like for this little girl. Heterochromia, a white streak in her dark hair, distinctive facial spacing, all markers that would have made her unmistakably different. Maya read Grace Thompson's letter again. "She's trying to learn about her family," Maya said. "Should I tell her?" "Absolutely," James said. "This is her story, and it could be historically significant." Maya completed the restoration, carefully enhancing the child's face. When finished, the little girl's features were clear, the wide-set eyes of different colors, the white streak, the serious expression of a child who knew she was different. Maya printed 2 copies, one for Grace and one for her files, then wrote an email. "Dear Miss Thompson, I have completed the restoration. The photo was badly damaged, but I recovered most details. During restoration, I know Tice, the youngest child, shows signs of Waardenburg syndrome, affecting pigmentation and facial structure. This condition wasn't recognized until 1951, so your 1906 ancestors would not have named what made her different. I share this so you may understand your family history. I'm happy to discuss this and help research more about her life." Maya hesitated but sent it. 3 days later, her phone rang. "Miss Richardson, this is Grace Thompson. I received your email. I've stared at the restored photo for 2 days. The little girl with different colored eyes. That's my great-great-grandmother, Sarah. Do you know anything about her life?" Grace asked. Grace explained she had gathered letters, Bible records, and newspaper clippings about Sarah. She had found a 1924 letter Sarah wrote to her daughter, describing being different all her life, and a woman named Clara who protected her. She asked Maya to help learn more about Sarah and Clara. 2 weeks later, Maya arrived in Charleston. Grace met her at the airport, and they drove past historic homes, live oaks, and landmarks of Black Charleston. The house in the photo no longer existed, but Grace had researched its location. Her home was full of family photos and documents, which they spread on a large table to study. Grace showed Maya letters from Sarah to her daughter, a journal from Clara Bennett spanning 1902 to 1928, full of medical notes and birth records. Clara had been a midwife and healer who watched over Sarah carefully, noting her milestones while protecting her from superstition in the community. Entries described Sarah as healthy but unusual, kept mostly at home for safety. Clara also educated her, knowing knowledge was the best protection for a child different from others. Grace pulled a 1925 newspaper clipping, showing Sarah as a young nurse. Maya compared it to the restored 1906 portrait. "The same wide-set eyes," Maya said. Grace confirmed. "That's Sarah." She had become a nurse despite her visible genetic condition. The next day, they visited Charleston County Public Library to research Clara Bennett and local nursing schools. The librarian, Frederick, remembered Clara and said she delivered many neighborhood babies and taught herself medicine. He brought records from the Cannon Street Hospital and training school for nurses. It was one of the few places in South Carolina that trained black nurses in the 1920s. If your ancestor trained as a nurse, her records could be here. Maya and Grace spent hours looking through admission forms, training lists, and graduation rosters. Finally, Grace spotted it. Sarah admitted September 1922, sponsored by Clara Bennett, graduated May 1925 with honors, special mention for dedication to patient care. Sponsored by Clara Bennett, Maya read aloud. So, Clara not only cared for and educated Sarah as a child, she gave her the chance to become a nurse. They found more details in Clara's journal entries from 1922. Sarah has been accepted to the nursing school. I used every contact and favor I had built over 30 years to make this happen. The school officials were unsure at first. Sarah's appearance was unusual and drew attention, not always in a good way, but her intelligence and persistence convinced them. She would face challenges other students didn't. People would stare at her eyes, whisper about her differences. But Sarah had lived her whole life being stared at. She knew how to face the world with dignity. Frederick brought them another set of records, employment files from the Charleston County Health Department. The health department had started hiring black nurses in the mid-1920s to work in black neighborhoods. If your ancestor worked in Charleston after graduation, there might be records. They found Sarah's name and employment records from 1926. Sarah, registered nurse, assigned to home visits in the East Side neighborhood. Monthly pay, $45. Frederick showed them a map of Charleston from the 1920s and pointed to a mostly black, poor area. The East Side, that was tough territory. Poor sanitation, crowded homes, limited access to health care. Nurses there entered houses where they could find anything from tuberculosis to malnutrition to untreated injuries. It took courage. Grace discovered a letter in Sarah's papers that gave insight into those years. Written in 1927 to her daughter, then a baby, it read, "I visit families who first look at me with doubt. My eyes make them unsure, but when I deliver a healthy baby, treat a child's fever, or show a mother how to care for her family, they forget my difference. They see me as someone who cares. Clara taught me that the best way to fight prejudice is to be clearly excellent at your work." On their third day in Charleston, Grace took Maya to the cemetery where Sarah was buried. It was a small, tidy African-American cemetery on the city outskirts with graves going back to the late 1800s. Sarah's headstone was simple, but carefully carved. Sarah, 1906 to 1952, beloved mother, grandmother, and healer. They stood quietly. Maya reflected on Sarah's life. Born visibly different in a place and time that punished difference, protected and educated by a remarkable woman who saw her potential, trained as a nurse against the odds, and spending her career caring for the most vulnerable. "I found one more thing," Grace said softly. She pulled a small wooden box from her bag. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, was a tarnished silver pin in the shape of a nurse's cap. This was Sarah's nursing pin from graduation. My grandmother gave it to me before she died. She said Sarah wore it every day at work, even after it went out of style. It reminded Sarah of everything she had overcome to earn it. Maya carefully photographed the pin, adding it to the growing record of Sarah's life. As she worked, an elderly woman approached, walking slowly with a cane. She looked at the headstone, then at Grace. "You're Sarah's family?" the woman asked. Grace nodded. "Her great-granddaughter. Did you know her child? Sarah delivered me," the woman said with a gentle smile. "December 1949. I was born 2 months early, and the doctors at the colored hospital said I wouldn't survive. But Sarah came to our house every day for 6 weeks, checking on me, teaching my mother how to care for a premature baby. She saved my life." The woman, Dorothy, was 74. She had lived her whole life in Charleston and remembered Sarah's visits in the late 1940s and early 1950s. People called her the nurse with angel eyes, Dorothy said, because one eye looked like heaven, or that's what folks said. She was patient, kind, never hurried. She would sit with families for hours, explaining things, making sure they knew how to care for themselves. Dorothy paused, looking at the headstone. "But I remember she was sometimes sad. My mother said Sarah had lived through things that would have broken most people, being different in a world that didn't understand difference, losing her husband young, working almost to exhaustion, trying to help others. But she never stopped caring." Maya asked if Dorothy would be willing to be filmed sharing her memories of Sarah. Dorothy agreed immediately. Sarah's story needed to be told. She was extraordinary, and people had forgotten. Young people today should know what it took for someone like Sarah to survive and succeed. That evening, Maya set up her camera in Grace's living room, and Dorothy returned to share her memories on film. She described Sarah's gentle way, her skill, the respect she earned, even from people who might have otherwise ignored a black woman nurse. She talked about Sarah's medicine bag, always tidy, and the way she explained medical procedures in simple terms families could understand. Maya spent the next 2 days interviewing older community members who remembered Sarah or had heard stories from their parents. A pattern emerged. Sarah had an unusual appearance but extraordinary character, someone who turned her difference into a strength. One man, 91-year-old Robert, remembered his mother telling him how Sarah kept going with her training, despite some administrators saying her looks would make patients uneasy. But Mama said once people met Sarah, saw how much she cared and how good she was, they forgot her eyes were different. They only saw her skill and kindness. Another woman, Patricia, had old photographs from her grandmother showing Sarah at a community health fair in 1948, teaching mothers about nutrition and child health. Sarah stood at a table covered with materials, surrounded by attentive women. Her distinctive eyes were visible, but what struck Patricia was her confident stance, her steady gaze, the sense of someone completely comfortable in her role despite a lifetime of being different. Maya also found records showing Sarah worked as a nurse until just 6 months before she died in 1952. She had been 46 and the death certificate listed heart failure. Clara's journal, continuing until 1928, mentions Sarah's health, noting she often pushed herself too hard and neglected her own care while helping others. The last piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Grace's cousin in Colombia contacted them with a box of materials that belonged to his mother, Sarah's daughter. Inside were letters Sarah wrote in the 1940s. When her daughter was at college, Sarah wrote intimately about her work, the families she cared for, and the struggles of being a black nurse in a segregated system. She also wrote about her childhood, growing up different and scared. In a letter from 1946, Sarah wrote, "I want you to understand what it means to be different, to have people stare and whisper. Clara taught me that difference can be a burden or a gift depending on how you carry it. I chose to let it make me more compassionate, more determined to help others who feel like outsiders. My eyes, which made people uneasy as a child, became my mark as a nurse. People remembered me, trusted me, knew I would come when needed. What could have limited me became my strength." Maya filmed Grace reading this letter. It captured Sarah's journey, from a child who must have felt alone and scared, protected by a remarkable healer who saw her potential, to a woman building a career helping others despite obstacles most cannot imagine. On Maya's last evening in Charleston, she and Grace compiled all they found into a detailed timeline of Sarah's life, with documents, photos, and oral testimonies. The story was extraordinary. A child born with Waardenburg syndrome in 1906 South Carolina, raised in segregation, protected by a community healer, trained as a nurse despite visible difference, dedicating her life to helping the most vulnerable. 3 months after returning to Brooklyn, Maya attended the Charleston Museum's opening of the exhibition Hidden Faces, Revealed Lives, the story of Sarah and Clara Bennett. The restored 1906 family. A photograph was central, showing Sarah's features clearly. Clara's journal was displayed open to the entry about Sarah's birth. Other walls held letters where Sarah reflected on turning difference into strength, photos of her as a young nurse, records from her training, and testimonies of those she had helped. The timeline showed how a rare genetic condition shaped an extraordinary life. Grace stood next to Maya with family members, cousins, nieces, nephews, and great-grandchildren of Sarah's siblings. The exhibition reunited branches of the family, disconnected for decades, all linked by an ancestor whose story had been hidden for generations. Dr. James Wright contributed a medical panel explaining Waardenburg syndrome, its genetics, and why it wouldn't be identified until 1951. He stressed that the condition affected appearance, but not intelligence or ability. The exhibition also honored Clara Bennett, whose journal preserved much of Sarah's story. Research showed Clara delivered over 800 babies, trained dozens in midwifery and herbal medicine, and quietly challenged the medical system by showing black women could provide skilled care even without formal recognition. A filmmaker who attended the opening asked Grace about making a documentary. A medical historian from Duke wanted to include Sarah's story in a book about genetic conditions in African American communities. A Charleston nursing school wanted to create a scholarship in Sarah's name for underrepresented students. That evening, Dorothy stood before Sarah's photograph, tears streaming. "I have lived 74 years because of her," she said. "I was born too early, too small, and she refused to let me die. She came every day, sometimes twice, teaching my mother how to care for me. She did it not because we had money, we didn't, but because she valued every life. Every child deserved a chance." Grace spoke to the crowd. "When I sent that damaged photo to Maya, I just wanted to see my ancestors' faces clearly. I never imagined what we'd discover or how many lives Sarah had touched. We knew she was a nurse, but not her full story. We didn't know about Clara, about the genetic condition, or how she turned difference into strength. We didn't know how many people she saved." Grace paused, looking at the photo of 4-year-old Sarah with striking eyes. Sarah grew up in a time when being different was dangerous, when being a black woman meant constant limits, when pursuing education and nursing required courage most of us can't imagine. But she did it, supported by people like Clara who saw her worth. This exhibition honors not only Sarah, but everyone in our communities who quietly made a difference, whose stories deserve to be remembered. Maya watched visitors read documents, study photos, and absorb the story of a woman born different in 1906, who turned that difference into a lifetime of service. Restoring one damaged photo had revealed a hidden history of resilience, courage, and determination. Elderly attendees shared stories of family members who were different and had faced similar challenges. The exhibition sparked conversations about difference, disability, and how communities treated those who didn't fit norms. As the reception ended, Maya stood before the restored photo, remembering the moment she first zoomed in on Sarah's face. People had seen her difference, even if they didn't understand it. Sarah's family and community made choices, some fearful, some protective, that shaped her life. The photo had become a window into hidden history, a testament to one person's determination and the community that supported her. 4-year-old Sarah, sitting on those porch steps in 1906 with her unusual eyes, had grown into a woman who delivered babies, treated illnesses, saved lives, and earned respect. Her face held a secret that took over a century to fully understand. But now, her story of difference, courage, and dedicated service would not be forgotten. Grace thanked Maya. "Thank you for seeing what was hidden and helping me find the truth. Sarah deserves to be remembered." Maya hugged her. "Thank you for trusting me with your family's story and for sharing it with the world. There are thousands of people like Sarah with stories hidden in damaged photos and forgotten documents. Maybe this will inspire others to look closer at their own family histories." As Maya flew back to Brooklyn, she thought about the restoration work waiting for her. Dozens of damaged photos from families wanting to see their ancestors clearly. How many hidden stories waited to be discovered? How many remarkable lives had been partially erased by time, damage, or neglect? Sarah's story had started with a damaged photo and ended with a museum exhibition, a reunited community, and a legacy finally honored. For Maya, it was a reminder: every photo is more than an image. Every photo is a story, and every face a life that deserves to be seen, understood, and remembered. Sarah's photo would continue to hang in the Charleston Museum, visible to generations who could learn from her strength. And somewhere in Charleston, elderly people who were children when Sarah delivered them or treated them would tell their grandchildren about the nurse with angel eyes who refused to let being different stop her from being extraordinary.